Gettysburg Seminary's Mark Oldenburg explores 4 ways to make your Lenten experience deeper and more meaningful as we take another look at the traditional time for attending to one's spiritual journey.
The first question you ask about Lent probably shouldn't be the first question you ask about Lent. If the first thing you think of about Lent is, what am I going to give up? You might want to go deeper. Because Lent has a job. It's got a job as a part of the whole Easter cycle, that whole period from Ash Wednesday to Pentecost Sunday. If there were a theme for that whole cycle, if there's something, one sentence that God is telling us throughout all of those months, it's this: God links us so closely with Christ that we're drawn with Him through death into life. Every part of that cycle, Lent, Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Ascension, Pentecost, each of them have a part to play in that theme. And Lent's an important one. If the theme of the whole cycle is God linking us so closely to Christ that we're drawn with Him through death into life, then Lent's job is about making sure that that embrace is the most fundamental to us. Since anything else we're embraced by more closely than we are to Christ is going to take us with whatever that thing is that we're related to. And if that thing or that person isn't Christ, that trajectory is simply to death. Only Christ will take us in His embrace through death into life. So Lent is a time for us to relativize all those other claims and to make sure that God is God. So that a good question to begin thinking about what you're going to do for Lent is to ask yourself, what are those other competing loyalties? What are the other competing embraces? What do I love, fear, or trust more than I do God? Some of those claims need simply to be eliminated. They need to be done away with. If addiction makes us center our lives on alcohol or sex, then we need to be freed and shouldn't wait for Lent for that to happen. There are ways of doing that, but that's beyond the scope of this. Mostly, those claims, those embraces, don't need to end, but may need to be relativized. Parenthood and patriotism, self-regard or financial security, all the things we're tempted on to rely for safety or for our own self-image, those simply need to be relativized. We shouldn't give them away. We shouldn't give them up. We don't have to get rid of them because they're vocations. The business of Lent is making sure they are vocations, things we're called to by God, ways of living out our baptism, of living out our relationship with God. Vocations rather than idolatry. And it happens to be that one of the ways that we can use for insight into that and to figure out how to relativize them is Lent. Are, in fact, the 4 traditional disciplines of Lent. Now, those 4 disciplines of a time when we turn from all other embraces to the embrace of Christ are prayer, service, study, and fasting. And I'm intentionally leaving fasting to the last because it's the one we mostly think of first. First of all, prayer. As marriage therapists know really well, The way to feed a healthy relationship is communication. And so it makes sense that one of the age-old disciplines of Lent has been prayer, both speaking to and listening to God. Chances are you're better at one of those than the other. And Lent may be a time to make sure that that's balanced. Are you listening? Are you speaking? Are you praying only at certain times? Would it be a good idea to come up with certain speed bumps that will remind you on the spur of the moment to pray? Things that might spark prayer. For instance, if you discover from your own discernment that you need to become more other-focused, you might discipline yourself during the season of Lent to pray for everyone who comes toward you on the street, although that might be a bit much. Maybe only praying for people who come toward you on the street wearing purple, or only people you know, or those who turn on the light when you walk into a room. If you need to have your horizons opened and to be interrupted, maybe you need to look for more opportunities for public worship, as the insights of other people and the needs of other people can break into your life. Or do you need to open up parts of your life to God? Are there things you haven't spoken about to God in ways that are inappropriate for public prayer? Then you might want to set aside some time for personal prayer or take part in an intimate group. So one tradition, the oldest discipline of Lent, is prayer. Another is service, what used to be called almsgiving. And the gift of giving alms, of taking part in service, particularly face-to-face, hands-on, working with and for others, is that it may, for instance, if you discover that's a need, free yourself from being the center of your own life. Free yourself also from the necessity of always being the one in charge, giving you a chance to serve, to help. It may free you from only meeting and hearing the familiar and the unexpected. Time that you spend, for instance, at a soup kitchen or a food bank, talking with the people who use that, maybe time with people you would not otherwise have known, who are able to get you out from being the center of your life, whose gift to you will be much larger than any gift you have to give to them. So prayer and service, meditation and almsgiving. If you only had to pick two disciplines, these would be the two to go with. They're the oldest. In many ways, they're the most powerful. And they're more than enough to work on. But there are two more as well. One unpopular and one maybe too popular, but popularly misunderstood. Along with prayer and service, another 1,000-plus-year-old discipline of Lent is study. Now, when I say this to seminary students, their faces fall. They figure they do more than enough studying the rest of the year. They don't need study added on to study, onto study. I reassure them, a little bit anyway, by saying the kind of study this is talking about is much different than what you do even for your favorite class. That this study is getting intimately involved with a short, meaningful, weighty passage. What you want to do is to study things that will provide counters to the tapes that are running in your head. If, For instance, one of your besetting sins, one of the things that is calling you away from service to God, is a tape in your mother's voice in your head that keeps saying to you, "Don't get too big for your britches." You might want to study Romans 12:1. Live with it. Memorize it. And repeat over and over again until it becomes as deeply under your skin as the old tape. Until you know and can say, present your body holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. If you can't think of anything else, Luther's advice is really good. Study the elements of the catechism, the stuff you know really well, the stuff you had to memorize in confirmation camp. Not the explanation, but the originals, the 10 Commandments, the Apostles' Creed, the different articles of the Creed, the different petitions of the Lord's Prayer. Just take one. If you want to know how to study them, how to pray them, there's no better place to go than Luther's 4-strand garland in a simple way to pray. Prayer, service, study, and finally the one everybody starts with, fasting. Fasting is not giving up something bad. If something is bad, you should give it up, not just fast it. Fasting is giving up something good for a little while, like the church gives up alleluias during Lent. It could be that giving up something that you will miss, something that is good, but that you can live without, can simply provide a speed bump for prayer and time and resources for study and good works. This is one reason why fasting food is useful. Your stomach will cramp a little bit, even if you just skip lunch one day a week. And every time it cramps, that can be a spark to prayer. And even if you only give up one meal a week, that will provide a little bit of time for prayer and study, and a little bit of resource for service. You could also give up something that you wonder whether it is in fact good for you, to see if you can do without it. So you might want to consider fasting from swearing or drinking alcohol. But at its best, fasting can also be a way of breaking habits and changing behavior, of being in service itself directly, with freeing yourself from that besetting sin. So, for instance, if you hope to free yourself from proving that you've got the sharpest wit among your friends, and you can insult the others in ways they can't respond to, you might want to fast not from chocolate, but from situation comedies, which is probably one of the places you learned that, and certainly one of the places that that's rewarded. You might want to give those up for a time, so that behavior isn't modeled. And you'll also get some time, not many resources, but some time on a Thursday night when you would have watched television, when you can do something else. Now, to be honest, it's a lot easier simply to say on Shrove Tuesday, I'm not going to eat chocolate for the next 40 days. This way of approaching Lent and approaching the disciplines means you got to do some soul searching, some self-searching, with some time during Epiphany. It may well mean that you're going to need to enlist support. It might mean that you get together with a partner to hold one another accountable to working on your besetting sins. So each of you can pray for but also report to the other. It may well be that you will ask your congregation to help you out as you go through this relativizing of embraces. For my money, this is the best explanation I can come up with for the imposition of ashes. It always seems strange when we read the gospel story of Jesus saying, "Don't make a show of your piety," that part of the service is making the sign of the cross with ashes on a part of the body that we can't see, that is only public. And yet, if that cross, if those ashes are an unspoken request for intercessory prayer and support, if we're saying to our brothers and sisters, I'm taking on something that I don't know that I'm equal to, and I need your help. But that's not a public display of piety. Instead, that's a way of bearing one another's burdens. Keeping Lent this way is more difficult, more challenging, but maybe more rewarding than simply giving up chocolate for 40 days. And you may find, come Easter Sunday, that what began as a duty will continue as a delight. And particularly, the prayer and the service and the study become part of that new resurrected life that Jesus pulls you into as he goes through death into life. Enjoy Lent.